Fisher on AFR Talk.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at onenewsnow.com. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us anytime at focalpoint@afr.net. focalpoint@afr.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Talking with Jeff Reed in the last segment about how a church kind of goes weak and soft on the issue of homosexuality, how gradual it is. It's kind of an erosional process. A lot of people in the church aren't even aware that it's happening. Some of the currents can be at a level where they're not even aware. So they are thinking one thing about where their church is at, where their church stands on the Bible's teaching of homosexuality, and maybe one day wake up and realize that the ground has been shifting beneath their feet. Let's see what I want to take calls on in this segment. I want to talk about this. I'll get to this here in a second, but I want to take calls on this topic in this segment. Do you think that social issues can be separated from economic issues in politics? Is it possible to separate social issues from economic issues? Because a lot of the Republicans, they're very squeamish about social issues. They want to get as far away from those things as they possibly can. They don't want to deal with social issues. They're messy. The Nevada Republican Party's taken abortion and marriage completely out of their party platform. There's a lot of people that want the national GOP to do that. I want to know what you think about that. Do you think that's a good move or a bad move for the GOP to take social issues out of their platform, and why? Why is it a good or bad idea? And I'll share some thoughts with you. Well, let me start off with this story. Then we'll get to some other stuff, and we'll come back to your phone calls. By the way, this whole business of what homosexual activists will tell you is that, hey, if it's adult and it's consensual, it's nobody's business. And it can't be immoral if it's adult and if it's consensual sex, then there's nothing unethical about that. There's nothing immoral about that. There can't be anything immoral about that because it's adults and it's consensual. Well, I'm looking at the story out of Honolulu, and maybe you've seen this before. They had a big dust up there because there for a time, apparently, the Honolulu Police Department was allowing members of the police department to actually have sex with prostitutes as a part of their law enforcement duties. That's one way to get them in the act. And they've passed an ordinance now in the city of Honolulu. It's a big scandal. And they've passed an ordinance in the city of Honolulu saying, no, you can't do it. Cops, you cannot sleep with prostitutes to make an arrest. Can't do it. We're not going to let you do it. And you think about that for a minute. It's exactly right. Everybody agrees this is a good policy. It's a horrible policy because they're committing a crime in order to arrest somebody for a crime. I mean, there isn't any one part of that makes sense. But here's what I want you to observe. This is adult sex. It is consensual sex, and it is flatly prohibited. In other words, Honolulu is rightly discriminating against sexually immoral behavior. So it is appropriate, it is right to discriminate against sexually immoral behavior. Now, homosexuality is sexually immoral behavior. So it's entirely appropriate for us to discriminate against homosexual behavior and to adopt public policies that say, look, we believe homosexual behavior, because we care about our citizens, because we care about their health, we are going to make homosexual behavior contrary to public policy. And let's not hear anybody say that, hey, it's nobody's business because it's adult and it's consensual. Well, let them talk to the people in Honolulu, because they've said there are certain forms of sex expression, even though they are adult and even though they're consensual, are and ought to be contrary to public policy. Maybe you saw the story about the first openly gay Episcopal bishop. His name was Gene Robinson. Big story, 2003, when he came out of the closet, announced that he was gay. He got married in 2010, and now they're getting divorced. He and his, quote, husband, end quote, are getting divorced. And one of the observations I've made about the homosexual lifestyle is marriage is never going to catch on in that community. It's just never going to catch on. And the reason is very simple, is there is no concept of fidelity or monogamy in the homosexual community. It does not exist. Monogamy is a myth. Monogamy in the homosexual community is a myth. Now, you'll hear homosexuals talk about it, and they will insist that there is monogamy and there is fidelity, but the research does not bear that out. I even had a former homosexual speak to my church one time back in Boise. He'd been very active in the homosexual lifestyle, and he said, I was in one of these monogamous, quote, end quote, relationships, and we had a deal where we could see each other, we could see other people on the side. Over in Holland, where they've had same-sex marriage now for some time, research was done in the active homosexual community there, and the average, quote, married homosexual had an average of 8 outside sexual partners over the course of a year. I mean, promiscuity with strangers is part and parcel of the homosexual lifestyle. Now, I'm certainly not saying that applies to 100% of homosexuals, not saying that at all, but the social research indicates this is a huge problem in the homosexual community. I'm looking at some statistics on promiscuity among homosexuals. According to Bell and Weinberg, this is a book published by Simon & Schuster, so this is not part of the vast right-wing conspiracy, and they reported, this is self-reported, people in the homosexual community, 43% of them, 43%, this is self-reported, estimated that they had had sex with 500 or more partners. 28% of homosexuals self-confessed that they had been involved with 1,000 or more sexual partners over the course of a lifetime. And 79% of homosexual men said that over half of their sexual partners are strangers. So these are anonymous sexual encounters, a lot of times in public places like parks and public bathrooms and so forth. Now, according to the Journal of Sex Research, again, not a part of the vast right-wing conspiracy, the modal range for homosexual sex partners is between 101 and 500. So don't let anybody lie to you, ladies and gentlemen. Monogamy is a homosexual myth. It's a myth in the homosexual community. Now, one last comment, and then we'll get to your calls about whether we can separate social issues from economic issues. This comes from Florida, and the heading of the piece is Teen Pregnancies Cost Florida Taxpayers $443 million a year. These are teen pregnancies. Who's paying for this? Who's picking up the tab? And maybe they ought to reconsider their public policies because they're subsidizing immorality. They're subsidizing illegitimacy. You're always going to get more of what you pay for. If you invest $443 million into something, you're going to get more of whatever you're pouring that money into. They're pouring $443 million into teen pregnancy. So you're going to get, what are you going to get? You're going to get more teen pregnancies. Yeah, here's the piece from Fox News. In human and economic costs, there's little entertainment value when it comes to Florida's more than 496,000 teen child births over the past 2 decades. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, teens and their children are much more likely to have lower education, health, and economic outcomes than those who wait to have children. As a result, taxpayers are on the hook for billions in related costs. Funded in part by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the study says Florida's taxpayers contributed $443 million in teen childbearing costs in 2010. Nationwide, taxpayers spent $9.4 billion. Now, this is beyond the catastrophic emotional, psychological damage that these out-of-wedlock pregnancies impose on women. But very clearly, there is a severe economic cost here. So you can't separate social values from a healthy economy. This is a drain on a healthy economy. And it comes as a result that certain social standards have just simply been ignored. So it's my point of view, you cannot possibly separate social issues from the economic issues. Cannot be done. You ignore the social issues, there is going to be a severe economic cost that the economy is going to suffer. Let's go to Erica in Wichita Falls, Texas. Erica, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mr. Fisher. Thanks for taking my call.
You betcha.
I might lose you because I'm on the road away from law, and I'm just trying to enter into Texas, but I'll be quick.
Okay.
You answered the question about social and economics cannot be separated, in which I agree. They both, if we use the word for illustration, they are married. And though one wants to separate or divorce the other, there is no can together. one that you have not mentioned, that is social and economic. But
All right, Erica, I think I've about lost you. I think you maybe just moved out of range there, so I'm sorry I wasn't able to hear everything that you had to say, but that's Erica from Wichita Falls, basically saying, look, you can't separate the social issues from other conservative issues. You can't separate them from the issue of economics. All right, thank you, Erica. Sorry we ran out of signal there. Let's go to Mark and head over Virginia. Mark, welcome. What's on your mind?
Well, howdy, Mr. Fisher.
Howdy.
This is the first time I ever get to call because normally I'm not sitting, and I would be always out of range. But you asked the question. That's a softball question. Economic and social issues are intertwined. You can't do one without the other. So, of course, you can't do one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that. It
All right.
Can't get any simpler.
Yeah. Now, can you think of any specific examples? I mean, I agree with you, and I think that was illustrated in that story out of Florida. Do you have any other examples or ways that come to your mind that show the linkage between the two, where there's a cost that's associated when we ignore certain social standards or values?
Oh, yeah. I guess we can come up with a litany of them. Take welfare. In order to provide welfare to someone, you have to take it away from someone else. Or let's say with this sex confusion thing, I have no other word for it.
Mm-hmm.
But you try and integrate that into society, and you have to take away from people who are thinking right.
Yeah.
So there's always a cost.
All right. Well, and I appreciate your call, Mark. And basically, you wind up what Mark is saying essentially isn't. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but if you have taxpayers that are working hard and they're putting their time in, they're paying their taxes, then they wind up subsidizing these costs. So they're not only working hard to live lives that are sound and that are characterized by integrity and value and commitment, they're also being forced now to subsidize these very poor life decisions that are made by other people. And you think about welfare, there's clearly a social issue or a values issue involved in that. If people are able to work, but they don't, and they're still receiving welfare benefits, then we are subsidizing idleness. We are subsidizing laziness. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that everybody on welfare is indolent and lazy, but we all know people who are. And that's a moral problem. It's an economic problem, but at root, it is a moral problem. People who do not accept responsibility for their own lives. You cannot separate social issues and economic issues. Focal Point, AFR Talk. Be right back.